A boring photographer makes a boring photograph.
Or maybe not necessarily a boring photographer, but a photographer who is being boring, or a photographer who is bored.
The goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will.
Welcome to Perspective, a podcast for wedding creatives, where we sit down often with a special guest and talk about our many years of experience in the wedding industry so that you can learn from us and grow your wedding business. Can you feel it? The air, it's palpable, filled with the anticipation of a new drop of content for our educational needs. Today on the podcast, we are speaking to Erika and Lanny of Two Mann Studios, who bring a unique and highly sought-after style of documentary photography to wedding celebrations all over the world. And so if you want to learn how to shoot wild and still be professional, keep listening. We're going to be transcending the ideas behind a traditional wedding photographer, as well as get more insight into Two Mann U. This episode is, of course, sponsored by With Jack and for a limited time, beans.ie. So Greg, why is your cup over there? Pass me your cup and let me pour you some coffee.
Yeah, we are drinking some more Proud Mary coffee from Beans, and it's their High Five, which is a Honduras Ovidio Gomez, and it's got notes of honey, it says. And it's in their curious category.
There's nothing more tense when you pour a very tall cup of coffee and you lift it over all the desk equipment, including laptops, mics, and the actual podcast desk. That was very nervous. We do have a sponsor. Like I said, it's beans.ie. As photographers, filmmakers, and business owners, we know the power of stories. And beans.ie do too. They started because they knew there were so many stories about the world of coffee, and not just about the regions or the varieties, but about the people behind the beans, the roasters, and us, the drinkers. This is the most flexible coffee subscription that we've ever used, showcasing some of the top roasters around the world who bring something different to the table. As podcast listeners, you have heard Greg and I talk about what we drink at our podcast table for years now. And you can join us. Curate your own monthly subscription from an ever-changing list of beautiful coffees. And because you are our best friends, we have a promo code for you. If you use promo code Perspective15, you can get 15% off your first order. That is promo code Perspective15 to get 15% off your first order for coffees with stories sent straight to your door. That is a very tasty coffee, but we are joined by today's guests, Erika and Lanny. How are you guys doing?
Okay, I think we're unmuted now.
Hello.
Yes, we're
Perfect.
doing great. And your description of your coffee was making our mouth water.
We're big fans of coffee
honey.
over here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we are. We are. Trust me, Lanny's the biggest coffee snob on the planet.
Oh,
we're
really?
drinking a single origin bean from Ethiopia with notes of pineapple and blackberry.
Oh, funky.
Yes.
Nice. I do like an Ethiopian coffee.
Yeah, me too.
They're always nice and fruity.
Yeah, nice and bright.
Yes. How did you brew it on the Chemex or V60, or do you guys have a machine?
Chemex, yeah. Did a slow
Yep.
pour through the Chemex this morning.
Yeah, I find Ethiopian beans through a Chemex is just, for me, it's just the way to drink those kind of beans, because it just pulls out the fruit. Yeah, that's just me though. Just me.
So how have you guys been? Have you been shooting recently?
No, our cameras are collecting dust. Like
Oh,
Buddy said, have you been shitting?
shitting. We've been doing lots of shitting.
We've been
but
shitting
not-
our pants.
We actually have been shitting our pants. Metaphorically speaking, we are shitting our pants. We've been shitting our pants since last
For a
March.
year, pretty much.
Pretty much a year to the date. We've been in a state of constant shitting.
But not a lot of shooting.
No, not a lot of shooting. I think we shot 2 weddings this year, right? Yeah. No, our cameras are pretty much collecting dust. We've got a few personal projects going on, but yeah, no shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like everyone else in the world. I think the only people that are shooting are like Texas photographers and Florida photographers. Everything seems normal down there.
Well, we were speaking to Seymour, was it last night? No, the night before. He's from New Zealand, and they seem to be free as the wind down there.
Yes. Well, yeah,
beautiful.
New Zealand, they're shooting. Yeah. Because they got rid of it. The Florida and Texas shooters, I think it's just from pure ignorance, but hey, we won't go there.
No. So I'm assuming you guys are very excited for the Two Mann U release.
Well, excited's one word for sure to describe it. Some days I'm excited. Some days I'm terrified. Some days I'm just exhausted by the prospect of how much we still have to do. But no, there's definitely an underlying excitement, but there's also a very big unknown, right? As with anything creative. Or any pursuit. Yeah, there's still a lot of unknown.
Especially right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel you. It's definitely an interesting time to put out some content. And for creatives ourselves, we've not been making a lot of money, so I can understand that worry. But to be honest, the content you guys have put out already is bloody fantastic, if I do say so. Like, it's so good. I thoroughly enjoy. Now, Blood on the Dance Floor, was that the free?
That was the original name.
That was the original name till we found out.
Yeah, somebody brought to our attention that apparently there's a band out there somewhere in the world by that name.
Oh, really?
We've never heard of, but they're being investigated for
pedophilia
right now.
Oh no!
So we decided to change the name.
Definitely change the name.
So we're now just calling it orgasmic lighting.
Orgasmic lighting.
Orgasmic.
Or how to kill it on the dance floor. Sorry, I got AirPods falling on my ears here.
UK listeners, I don't know if you're like me. You heard that Blood on the Dance Floor. You've got that Sophie Alice Baxter song.
That's Murder on the Dance Floor.
Oh, so it is. Murder on the dance floor. You got the man to move, baby.
Well, Blood on the Dance Floor is also a Michael Jackson song.
Which isn't much better.
Which isn't necessarily any better.
So we got Michael Jackson, and then we've got a band that's being investigated for pedophilia, and both are very, So we had to change the name. The name.
Fair enough. Man, what a way to start this podcast, man.
Yeah, totally. You know, there's never a dull moment in the photography industry.
Yeah, well, yes, indeed. Did I see recently that you're going to be giving away some of this educational content for a special winner at some point?
Yes.
We've got a scholarship opportunity essentially.
Yeah.
Where we're doing a random draw on Friday actually.
Oh,
and and basically you can enter the draw easily just by entering, but you can also enter your name more than once by sharing the contest.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
and we've also got a program laid out where if you share it enough, earn enough points, you can earn yourself a scholarship.
Yeah, there's 2 people that have earned themselves a full scholarship.
Scholarship, yeah.
So
really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And there's a couple others that are well on their way. Like they're almost there.
Okay. Yeah. So for the people listening live, you still have the opportunity to go and sign up and try your hand at getting a scholarship. How do they do that though, guys?
So the people that have won so far, I asked them to share their strategy actually in our Facebook community because I want more people to succeed with this. Basically, they just asked their community for help. One of them created a video, but it's so hard to say how because both of the individuals that won have a really strong, tight-knit community, and it's come from a lot of the personal work that they've done, especially in the last year through the pandemic. A lot of them were doing, personal projects where they were, featuring the lives of people at the front line of the pandemic. And so by the time this contest came along, people were more than happy to help them out by signing up with their email.
Right. But it's essentially it's a game of sharing the contest with others And the more you do so, kind of the more times your name gets entered into the hat. But that being said, when we do the random draw on Friday, we're going to share some
Other opportunities.
scholarship opportunities that we have in mind.
Scholarship's always been a big part of our workshops. Like I think every single workshop we've run has always had one participant there on scholarship. And
All right.
And we try to find
cool.
ways to get those scholarships to the photographers who need it.
yeah.
Need it most.
Yeah. And of course we realize there's many people that need it.
Of course. Yeah.
But needs the wrong word, because it isn't
The tricky part is coming up with something that's, a fair opportunity for everyone.
Yeah. No, but it's cool that you even offer that. So
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's very exciting as well, because I mean, so how much is the scholarship worth in like total value?
$2,900 US.
Well, technically 3,900. The course Two Mann U is 3,900, but this time we're doing it for 2,900. So essentially, it's a full scholarship. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So if you haven't already gone over and put your name down, listeners, I would highly recommend you do so. Because that is
still time.
What's the line? You got to be in it to win it.
You got to be into it.
Exactly. You got to buy a ticket.
You got to buy a lottery ticket. Yeah.
Yeah. You just need one. And you have a chance.
Yes. Awesome. Well, I'm just going to do a Q&A reminder just now. So for our live listeners on Clubhouse, thank you very much for joining us today. I think it's going to be a really awesome discussion. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the podcast. So all you need to do is put your hand up and we'll invite you into the room and you can speak directly to Erika and Lanny and ask any questions that you have about shooting or business or whatever it may be. If you're listening to this later, or in fact, if you're listening to this now, you can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/perspective by Cinemate. And you can support the creation of this podcast and get yourself access to the Q&A session later on. However, let's get on moving. Like I said, guys, thank you very much for joining us. I gave a little introduction to who you guys are as creatives, but I always like to ask our guests how they define who they are and how do you define what you do? So who are you and what do you do?
Holy shit. Oh my God. That is a hard question. I would say that I go out of my way to not define myself and what I do, because definitions are going to put me in a box that I don't want to be in. I'd rather not have a definition.
Right.
Fair
and
enough.
I'd say
Well,
if I did have to, start using words to describe who I am, a photographer or any photography related words would be way far down the list.
Oh yeah.
I'd be,
so
human
that was
first, husband, dad, brother, son, all those things, long before we get to photography.
yeah. I was going to say, when you said you didn't want to be put in a box, I was going to ask you which box you didn't want to be put into. Because you you do go against kind of the traditional mindset of what a photographer is supposed to be at a wedding, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know what the traditional mindset is really, but yeah, I wouldn't say we've gone out of our way to break the mold, but I would say our very survival in the industry, not in the industry, but as humans, is to not break the mold, but to find creative ways that allow us to find meaning in our work, and it's very hard to find meaning in, for me at least, in wedding photography as a genre within that sort of box. But I can find meaning in humans and relationships and emotion and all that other stuff that happens to humans every day of their life, including wedding days. So
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we ever really consciously set out to break the mold or go outside the box or do the unconventional at weddings. It's more that we just end up doing things that feel right, that we're drawn to do for whatever reason. And often that's not what is maybe a conventional, traditional idea of what a wedding photographer is supposed to do. And that took us a while, because early on in the first, few seasons of our career, we were trying to be wedding photographers. Like, we didn't know what to do. And so we were just doing what we thought we were supposed to do based off, what we were seeing other photographers doing. And eventually we started to realize, that weddings are boring and silly. And most of the things that we were doing were silly as well. And eventually we realized that if we just stop trying to be wedding photographers and doing what we think we're supposed to do, then all of a sudden we started to see aspects of weddings that weren't silly and boring. Interesting things that happened down beneath the surface pageantry. And that was just a matter of kind of being drawn into the things that we do find interesting, which isn't a lot of the predictable timeline type stuff that happens on the surface of
weddings. And there was actually, now that I think about it, there was a few conscious moments in there. Like, I remember, I can't remember the specific wedding or the specific year, but I do remember a moment where I was like, why the fuck am I taking a picture of this dress hanging in a tree? Like, really, why am I this dress looks way better on her body than on a plastic hanger. The dress, why would the dress be hanging in the tree in the first place? That's not interesting. And I started realizing, and I think we have, as humans, we have this incredible capacity to normalize things. And for some reason, it's become normal in the wedding photography industry to photograph objects and objects without human elements.
and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Particularly if you're drawn to do that, like, you're genuinely interested in making those kind of images at weddings, go for it, right? Because you're going to be doing it from a place of actual interest.
And curiosity, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But for us, that wasn't there. We were just doing it for the sake of doing it because we felt like we're supposed to.
Yeah.
So, and by letting go of that, it opened up this whole world of, now we've got all this extra energy and attention that we can tap into noticing all these other things that we could be shooting.
Yeah. So there was a moment where it was like, why are we doing this? And we realized we were only doing it because it was expected of us, but not necessarily expected for a good reason, right? So we stopped doing it.
But it's not just the things that you choose to shoot and not shoot; it's how you shoot it too, right? I mean, if something's happening, it feels boring for us to just shoot it from a predictable perspective. It's more interesting to imagine what it might look like from some unexpected angle, right? Or to light it in some, some different way.
Yeah. And so that breaking the mold that you're talking about, it literally came from a place of survival, because we realized if we're going to stay in this industry, we're not going to last very long or be fulfilled in any way whatsoever if we keep doing what we're doing. And I mean, this is not like a moment in time. This is a continual process. Like, every time we show up to a wedding, it's a struggle. It's a struggle in terms of maintaining that curiosity and maintaining that interest and trying to find those new perspectives and those that interest in an event that on the surface can be quite ordinary and boring, right? So,
So, I mean, do you guys, for the photographers out there, because obviously we, as videographers, as filmmakers, we don't really go out of our way to shoot details unless they're being interacted with by people.
Yeah, we had a similar realization that we would sometimes get the shot years ago of the dress hanging, and it would be like, why is it hanging there, as you said? And then realized it makes more sense for the bride or someone to be interacting with the dress and maybe carrying it somewhere. That tells the story better.
Yeah.
But I know a big part of a photographer's kind of thing is to shoot the details. Do you guys shoot details at all, or do you just go about your business, or do you wait until they're being interacted with, kind of like we do, or like what's your approach to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we do shoot details, but maybe not in the straightforward way or the traditional way. I mean,
If a bride puts her earrings on, we shoot her putting the earrings on. If a bride puts her shoes on, we shoot her putting the shoes on. So inevitably we get it's the same as you. We get all the details, but in the context of the
real
larger story.
Yeah.
In terms of like shooting inanimate objects sitting somewhere, that form of detail shot, we only really do it if there's been some indication from our clients that here's something that's very significant or important to us, and we would like to have a detailed photo of it on its own. Yeah. And in that case, we make note of that, and we make sure that we have time to do that for them.
Yeah, and of course, if they've spent $20,000 on customized ice sculptures for the center of each of the tables, we're going to make sure we shoot that, right?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
And you usually have a pretty good idea going into the wedding, how much details are important to the clients. If they've invested, in the reception space, for example, and they've got all kinds of crazy things that set up, then we're going to make sure that we have time to go in there and capture that for them, right?
Yeah. Or we just bring someone along to do it, because we can bring someone along who's better at shooting details than we are. It's definitely not our specialty.
Fair enough. Yeah. You talked about the early days. So take us back. What's been your journey? How did you guys start? How did you guys meet? How did you create Two Mann Studios?
Okay.
Well, it's a long and convoluted story.
Asterisks in bullet points.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's just start with. So we met 20 years ago. So we're not going to go way, way back then.
20
or more than 20.
3 years ago.
We've been together half our lives now. We started, our first company was called Two Mann Tent Photography, which was an outdoor adventure-based photography company that that made no money. In fact, we made minus money every year.
I mean, like most of us, our journey towards wedding photography wasn't an intentional one. Like very few wedding photographers set out to become wedding photographers. It ends up being some, combination of life circumstances that lead to certain opportunities. And eventually one day we look at ourselves and realize, oh, it looks like we're wedding photographers for now. And that was our case. That we got into adventure sports photography because we were involved in adventure sports. I mean, that was like the biggest passion in our lives at the time, was traveling the world to climb and ski. And so cameras just essentially became our way of documenting those adventures and coming home and being able to share the stories with friends and families afterwards. And then that just sort of led to one day a friend who realized that we kind of knew what we were doing with cameras, asked us to shoot her wedding. And it was like, okay, well, we'll give that a go. And we hated it. That first wedding was a nightmare. She asked us, I remember after the wedding, she's like, so are you gonna shoot more weddings in the future? We're like, fuck no. Like we were so out of our element there, trying to be wedding photographers, not knowing what we were supposed to do.
But we were living, paycheck to pay. Like we were dirt bags at this point. We had no money, like very little money. So yeah, initially it was definitely for the money. I remember saying, we didn't like shooting weddings, but we're like, you know what? If someone can pay us enough money, I'll do it. I'll do anything for enough money. Like I'll clean outhouses for enough money, right? So because we thought the payoff would be great. So we set our prices at like, I don't know, $1,500 or something ridiculously low. And for us, it was like this, we were like, oh my God, we just made $2,000 that weekend.
Who would pay $2,000?
And then, of course, it's especially in Canadian dollars, that's not a lot of money, guys. Yeah. And that quickly became very apparent. But yeah.
But then essentially what happened slowly, gradually is we started to, maybe enjoy is not the right word, but we started to appreciate the challenge of wedding photography for all the same reasons that we hated it at first. How challenging it was, how like the high pressure nature of it, the having to get it done.
Well, and it forced us into this, like, this is one of the things I love about wedding photography, because there's so many people that want to live a creative life, right? And they want to create things. And I just read this great book by Seth Godin called The Practice, Shipping Creative Work. And as wedding photographers, we're in a position where we don't get to decide whether or not we're going to create this weekend. We're put in the position where it's like, you have to create this weekend and you have to deliver to your clients. So it's almost forcing the creative process on us, which I have really appreciated, because this profession has shown me what living a creative life is, right? Not just in theory, but in actual practice. And there's not a lot of professions where you have to show up and be creative. And so that's been a real, I mean, it's torment. It's absolute torment. Like shooting, we finish a wedding and we are so exhausted and we're at each other's throats and we think we failed. But at the end of the day, that's the creative process, and we're being forced into it, and we have to create, which has been a huge gift.
Have you guys, throughout your photography career, always been based out of Canmore?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is where we started the first business.
I've got family that stay there.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, they run a design studio, and they were saying that Canmore is quite a destination for wedding photography. So
Yes.
do you think that helped in the starting phase to sort of get some work in?
It did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it helps that we're surrounded by ice-capped mountains, like beautiful mountains.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that
beautiful
definitely, like we weren't shooting in, community halls, or we're shooting in a beautiful location. It also helped that we were in Alberta, which is, I think the average price per wedding in this province, at least back when we started, was higher than any other province in Alberta. So in Canada. So yeah, all that was really beneficial to us at the beginning, for sure.
Yeah. So what's the dynamic in Two Mann Studio now? How does it work between the two of you? Who does what?
Oh, Jesus.
Well,
The dynamic.
well, I would say we kind of had our systems figured out for the wedding workflow. And we do have our systems pretty dialed in now for the wedding workflow itself, in terms of the entire client experience and everything that happens before the wedding and then after the wedding and the delivery. And then we've got sort of the other side of what we do, which is education, workshops, speaking, and that's a whole other animal. And where a lot of tension happens.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a shared creative, we're together trying to come up with a presentation or an educational experience, and it comes from both of us, and we kind of have to create it together, deliver it together.
It's torturous.
And that's a tricky one. Honestly,
it's absolutely torturous working with your husband. Like, I'm not saying, I'm saying that jokingly, but it's also like, oh my gosh, yeah. Our dynamic is, it's changes. Like, our dynamic today is different than our dynamic yesterday. It really depends. Like,
well, that's the nature of
marriage.
of marriage and relationships. And where it gets tricky is when everything is so intertwined with us, with our kids and our life and our business, right? We shoot together, we teach together. So for the wedding workflow, we learned that we had to separate our roles and kind of have clear boundaries. And sometimes we do a pretty good job with that. Erika is pretty much two-man ground control. She essentially runs the business, and everything comes through Erika and her inbox. And
Lanny micromanages.
And I micromanage, but really the buck stops with Erika. Anything to do with our clients and the client experience, and all the things that need to happen, essentially to get us to the wedding, and then to make sure that everything gets delivered in the end. My biggest piece of that whole workflow is pretty much editing. And even there, just a piece of that, kind of the artisan side, the artisan edits, and then we outsource the rest.
Yeah, no, and it sounds great on paper, like it sounds simple, but no, it's hardly simple because there's there's our egos, there's simple things like when we do workshops together, like who wants to say what, and what idea feels more him and what idea feels more me. And then there's the whole dynamic of the students. And then there's sexism, and you add that into the equation, and that there's so many different elements that come in that affect not just our business, but our relationship and our marriage and our family life. And so that's a constant struggle trying to keep.
Right. And it's a fundamental part of what we do and what we end up creating, for better or for worse. It has shaped what we do, how we do it, and the work that we create.
And we don't try and hide any of it. That's the thing. Like, we are very honest about, and some people dislike that. They dislike how
rather believe it's all rainbows, but it's not.
Yeah. Anybody that's been to a workshop of ours has seen Lanny and I get into some sort of heated discussion about something.
Yeah, and the reason for that is honestly because we do both care so much about the experience that we're delivering.
It's that and your inability to accept boundaries. But we won't get into
that.
Yeah.
I think that's good though, because if somebody's seeing that, if there's somebody seeing that at a workshop, they're seeing the true you, and they're not seeing like a sugar-coated, we've got it all perfect sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think
this is our
good
brand.
to show.
Yeah.
Well, and the struggle is part of what we end up doing as artists is born from the struggles, and we all have shared struggles, and we all have very different struggles. And one of our big struggles is figuring out how to do what we do together as a husband-wife team. And in some ways, that's been a huge blessing, and it's helped us create work that is probably goes places that we couldn't have gone on our own. But at the same time, it comes with sacrifices, right? There's drawbacks. Yeah. And so a big constant struggle for us is figuring out how to make it work. Not just in our business, but obviously in our life and our family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can wholly, not wholly sympathize with your setup, because obviously the way I would describe it is that Greg is my Erika and I am Lanny. I am, it's funny how you've like given yourselves the same roles as what we do over here. Yeah. And you're right. We do also have those butting head moments, I suppose. Yeah. But I think I'm a little bit more stronger-willed than Greg, so I think I win most of the time. Yeah, which maybe isn't a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah. So I can relate. Yeah.
I want to get on to how you guys create the stuff that you do. I feel like a lot of our season of the podcast so far has been about mindset and overcoming issues about yourselves as a creative. But with you guys, I really want to know, how you do what you do. And I think our listeners do too. So let's talk about kit for a minute, because you certainly don't seem like the standard 35-85 combo shooters. Which there's nothing wrong with, of course. I should caveat with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Talk us through your kit. What are the tools of the images that you create?
Mostly 35 and 85.
No, with some caveats.
With some caveats, but okay. I would say at any point during the day, our main goal is one camera, one lens, and it's
or as close to that as we can be.
And it's usually the 35 or the 85, except on the dance floor.
And portraits. Portraits and the dance floor would be the two main caveats to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And ceremony. Okay. And speeches.
Well, yeah. But
I would say, though, when we're in documentary mode, so let's say like for the first half of the day when people are getting ready and we're trying to just be in... we are just in reactionary mode. Like we're not creating it. We're not directing anything or setting anything up. So we're just reacting to whatever happens, which is a pretty fundamental part of our approach, honestly.
Yep.
And for that, we want to be as light and fast as possible. So we'll mostly be shooting ambient light, unless it makes sense unless we have the opportunity to bring in something else. And if we can be one camera, one lens, and it's usually 35, unless we're in a space that we want something even wider, in which case we might have the 16 to 35.
Right.
And then ceremonies would be similar in that we each have one wide lens and one telephoto lens, right? And then once we get to the dance floor, we're 16 to 35, pretty much at 16 if possible. If we can be that close, we want to. Yeah.
The images that are most striking to me are those kind of 16 mil images that you guys create, just because I feel like a lot of photographers, we're the same. Shooting minimal is the best way to be, because then you can just concentrate on, you know, that relationship with the client. You're not panicking too much about, oh, I should have used this lens or what you know, what's my camera settings or whatever it is that's bothering you about your technology that day. You can just concentrate on, you know, this is a person in front of me and I'm a person as well. I'm not just a camera person working, and you can kind of work on that rapport and that relationship to, you know,
well, and having limited options is that's where having to make it work with the one lens, one camera simplifies our thinking. And, you know, we often think creativity comes from having options and all different lens choices that we want and knowing, you know, it actually comes, at least for me, it comes from limitations of having to make. My most creative shots have come from scenarios where I had to make something work that I never normally would have had to make work.
Yeah, it's absolutely a mental bandwidth thing. When you've got infinite possibilities, and if you think about it, if you've got like 2 zoom lenses, so let's say 24 to 70 and 70 to 200, you've got infinite possibilities of what you could do. But when you've got like one prime lens, one focal length, that simplifies it down to one option. There is one best place for me to go with my camera right now. And so it frees up so much more mental bandwidth to just doing the basics, filling the frame, getting in there.
Yeah.
You know?
So you do have your 85, you've got your 35, you 16, did you say 16 to 35 as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty much just on the dance floor, but yeah.
Yeah. Any other interesting lenses that you use or?
We've got the 50 and we've got the 135. They come out occasionally.
They'll come out for portraits.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not
Yeah.
Not really.
And then for our flashes, we use mostly just the ProPhoto A1s. We do have the B10s, but they
hardly ever get used.
Yeah, a rare thing that we'll be using those.
Yeah. They might get used for like family portraits, family formals or something. But
Right.
And what camera bodies are you shooting with, out of interest?
Sony A9s.
All right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Earlier we touched on the fact that the Two Mann U is launching pretty soon. So tell us a bit more about that. What does the whole sort of thing cover?
Oh God. I guess the easier question to answer would be, what does it not cover? It doesn't cover how to Instagram. It doesn't cover, no, it literally is
everything.
So very early on in our wedding career, we decided, like, if we're going to shoot weddings, we only want to shoot them one way, which is we tell the whole story. We give them everything we got for the entire wedding day.
All in.
And it's been the exact same with our workshops. It's you either get the 2-man workshop or you don't get the 2-man workshop. Like, there's no like, oh, I'm just going to do the editing portion, or I'm just going to do the posing class. Because the thing with art and photography is that nothing exists in isolation from anything else. So I'd say the 3 things, like if I were to boil the workshop down to sort of the 3 big elements, it's art, which is the hardest one to teach, right? Art, craft, which is quite easy to teach. Craft is like how we use our equipment, how we figure out our flash settings, our f-stop, like all that sort of stuff. So craft, how we transform that craft into art, and then industry, which is how we actually survive as artists and as photographers in this very sort of volatile industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's like, it's 121 modules. So
it's, you know, so like some of the free workshops that we do in our Facebook community, for example, would kind of be like software updates. You know, it's like, here's a topic, right? Let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Whereas Two Mann U, like our full 2-man workshops have always been about a full operating system update. Like, this is the entire operating system. And so the only way that we really know how to do that is everything, because it's so interconnected and so intertwined. And it really is about more than just the information itself. Like the curriculum is monstrous, like the actual content, but that's just information, right?
Information you can find anywhere.
Every little piece of information that's in there is out there somewhere else already. You can go and find it, right? But where most of the intent has gone is into how we put that together and create this arc of the learning experience, right? Start to finish, how it's all intertwined, how it all fits together, and all the context in order for it all to make sense. So it's really like it's everything as best we can put it together in a learning adventure.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not just an online course. You get a bunch of videos and they sit on your hard drive. It's a 14-week like semester long journey essentially where we literally go through the entire program with the students at the same pace, so that we can go live into the community with them and answer their questions as they come up. So we as best we could possibly replicate the in-person workshop experience we've tried to do here, except we're able to do it over 14 weeks, which allows for the space, right, to actually absorb things and process things and practice things as you're learning them. But ideally, we want, like when we get to the end of the 14 weeks, we want that to be a real graduation experience for the students. Like
that is so cool. I actually like the fact that you give all that time, because and I love workshops. I mean, Photography Farm, I see a few Photography Farm members down there, and obviously Lisa Devlin is joining us. Like Photography Farm over here is just amazing. It's over a couple of days, and they've got sessions where you can shoot with couples and learning and stuff.
Yeah, we met Lisa last year at this time in Poland, actually, and we were going to come to Photography Farm.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been so cool.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah.
But
hopefully in the future.
Another year.
Another year.
Yeah.
But having that time, that 14 weeks to like you said, absorb and think about things, and that's a really important time.
Yeah, and it was one of the realizations we had when we were looking at our 3-day in-person workshop. Because after every workshop, we question, like, how can we improve upon this? How can we make the next one even better? And we realized one of the limitations is just time. Like you're drinking from a fire hose for 3 huge days. And so that was one of the areas where we realized there's untapped potential there, where we could create an even better learning experience.
Yeah, and it's almost like if you think of the analogy of working out, right? When you're working out, you're tearing your muscle fibers, and it's during the recovery. It's during that recovery time where your muscle fibers become stronger.
Build back stronger, yeah.
Right?
Build back stronger.
Build back stronger. And so I feel like having that space to absorb the content, tear your... maybe change your perspective a little bit, but having that time in between to actually let it absorb and let it marinate, that's where all the growth is going to come from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then the other untapped potential or limitation that we recognized at the workshops is we could only show so much. Right? For a small group of photographers within 3 days, like we could only go out and do like a demo shoot, for example, in like one location. And we started to imagine, like, what if we could take them to 27 different locations and show what we would do in all kinds of different lighting scenarios, right? Yeah. What if we could actually take the students to an actual wedding with us? Go behind the scenes and see what it actually looks and sounds like at an actual wedding. That was the other untapped potential, where, like, imagine if we had cameras where we could show what's going on from multiple different angles, right? If we could show them what's coming out of our viewfinder, like literally as we're shooting it. So that's really when we started to imagine what Two Mann U could be.
Awesome. Do you have any funny moments that didn't make the cut of certain videos that you're going to be releasing?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's the moment where I told Lanny to shut the fuck up.
Well, that made the cut.
No, it didn't.
Oh, it didn't?
No. It didn't. Oh yeah, there's
Oh, you mean at the wedding?
no at the
in the
when I was
studio.
trying to teach lighting and you were cutting in every 5 seconds trying to. Anyways, no, there's lots of moments. The video crew has got to know us very well.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps a little too well.
But we haven't tried to hide it. Honestly, I mean, it's in there. You see, like at the wedding, for example, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean,
Yeah.
So
you see how the sausage is made.
who's got final say on the edit? Is it the video crew, or are you guys doing the edit?
The video crew's doing the editing for us, but with lots of input from us.
A lot of back and forth. Collaboration, getting it right. Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, right now I'm working on weeks 8 and 9, which is the weeks that that's all the behind the scenes coverage of the wedding we shoot, and it is painful. Like, you know, when you get home from a wedding and you're like, oh, I missed this and I missed that, but then eventually
and you relive it.
You forget all the things that you missed and you realize you got quite a bit. When you're sorry.
Oh yeah.
My phone keeps ringing here. When you're watching a video of yourself shooting the wedding, like I'm just palm facing every 5 seconds. I'm like, we missed this. My camera wasn't up for this. I should have been over here. Like, it is just painful.
Like, we're learning a lot from what we've never seen what we look like, right? So, and you on that wide angle, you see everything that's happening.
I'm like, every single scene, I'm like, why wasn't I standing over here? I could have layered these 3 stories together. Oh, I didn't see that moment happening over there. Like, it's absolutely a painful process, but I'm going to get through it.
Yeah. That could be really eye-opening experience for people if they, like, maybe they should start taking a BTS shooter to every wedding and then they can review how they work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this opportunity just to do another Q&A reminder. There's going to be a Q&A section at the end of the next section of the podcast. So thank you for joining us live on Clubhouse. Definitely keep listening and you can stick your hand up and ask Lanny and Erika anything you want, or even just say hello. You can also listen back to the Q&A section if you support us on Patreon. The address is patreon.com/perspective by Cinemate. We've just launched it, so yep, thank you for bearing with us. Yeah, we've got a little ad break, and then we'll be right back with you. 2 seconds.
With Jack was designed from the ground up and is tailored specifically for creatives. Whether you provide a service like design, development, or photography, or offer advice to clients, With Jack is for you. It's focused on creatives. Insurance shouldn't be complicated, so With Jack has made every step easy. You'll deal with one form and talk to one Jack as you sign up, get covered, and move on with your day. With Jack is all about bespoke insurance for creatives. Simple. That doesn't mean more forms or faff, it means less. It's not about endless features and stale service. It's about one solid policy and the personal touch. Bye-bye unnecessary fuss. Hello, creative friendly insurance. Be a confident creative.
Erika, Lanny, what makes a boring photograph?
A boring photographer makes a boring photograph.
Okay.
Or maybe not necessarily a boring photographer, but a photographer who is being boring, or a photographer who is bored.
Yes. And I honestly, yeah, because just like, you know, I mean, the people that say I'm bored the most tend to be kids, right? They're like, Mom, I'm bored. And really, when they're bored, they're just acting bored. They're making a choice to not find any interest in anything. And it's not the world's job to create interest for them. That's what I always tell them. Like, if you're bored, you're boring. And it's same with wedding photography. If you're not interested in what you're shooting, if you're bored, which often, I mean, Lanny and I are bored at weddings a lot of the time, and that's when we make boring shots. But if you're bored, you're going to make boring shots. And actually, this reminds me of, I can't remember where I read this passage. I think it was in the book on being a photographer, but they were interviewing an author. And the author said the hardest chapters of the book to write are the boring chapters. And I thought that is so relevant to photographers as well. like the boring parts of the wedding day, those are the hardest pictures to write.
But those boring chapters are also often the most important chapters.
Yes.
Because they're fundamental to everything else.
Yeah, they're fundamental.
Right?
Yeah. So we have to work really hard and be super curious. And it's so easy to just say, be curious and be interested. But no, that's a torturous process, like to try and find interest in something that's actually on the surface quite boring. So
yeah. How do you activate your mind in a non-boring fashion when you're at a wedding, having to deal with, you know, the boring in quotes moments?
Yeah. I wish it were a switch, and I wish. I mean, the biggest thing is, and this is a lifelong process. This is never something you can just sort of turn on or off, but it really boils down to just being in the moment, to truly being where you are. And I feel like, especially wedding photographers, we're often on that wedding day, we're thinking about the blog post, or we're thinking about what we're missing, or we're thinking about the final delivery of the images.
Yeah.
We just have to realize that like the past and the present, or the past and the future, all those elements actually hold no relevance, right? The only thing that matters is what you're doing right now with your camera, or not doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or not even with your camera, but with your mind. Yeah.
Right. And tuning into what's happening around you is a tricky thing. But I realized a few years ago that like my inner ego was hindering my photography. It was preventing me from tuning into the actual story and the things that were happening around me, because I was so preoccupied with always thinking about the end result, right? And trying to find the next most epic image I can possibly make. And so that was, you know, taking up too much of my mental bandwidth. It wasn't leaving anything over for actually recognizing the subtle little things that are happening and finding interest in, look at that. That's interesting. And so then what happened is the work shifted, because now I was being guided more by the story and the narrative in terms of what I did with my camera versus, you know, me and my photography and thinking about, you know, how can I make the coolest possible image?
Yeah.
That was cool, but boring.
Cool, but boring, because it wasn't a reflection of my interest in the subject matter or the story. It was a reflection of my interest in photography.
And there's a lot of photos like that out right now where it's cool and it's eye candy, but at the heart of it, it's just kind of boring.
It's missing the soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can get you. I kind of covered this a little bit earlier, but you use the words friends with a camera. What are you whispering about?
I'm telling Lanny, Lanny keeps on like every 5 seconds, he's like scrolling to see who's in the room. So I'm like, just stop doing that.
Lanny, for goodness sake, be here with Greg and I.
Yeah.
I know it's live, but come on.
Yeah.
Be now. You described yourselves as a friend with a camera during your free chapter, which I would totally recommend our listeners to go check out, because it is free and you can look at it right now. It's very cool. A friend with a camera. What does that mean to you? Can you elaborate?
Well, I would say that's the vibe that we're going for. So when we arrive at the wedding as the hired professionals to document their day for them, we want to be on that friend level versus the hired help. That's part of getting the access to be close, for example, for them to like welcome us in and be a part of the day, because you're right. You were talking about the power of being close with those wide lenses. There's something about it. You can feel it, right? But you can't get close unless they let you close. And so we kind of set our vibe right from when even before they hire, even before they inquire with us, from the work that they see. And then when they do inquire with us, when we meet with them and start to explain what to expect from us, we obviously talk about, our approach and how we get close and how we don't direct anything. But more important than the actual education and setting their expectations is how we do so. Like the way that we conduct ourselves the way that we answer their questions is literally the way we would for our best friend. Like if a friend or colleague asked us this question, this is how we would respond, versus the consummate professional who's trying to seal the deal. And so we sort of conduct ourselves that way with the goal of feeling like friends with cameras at their wedding, and for them to feel like we are friends with cameras, so that they will let us in, right? So that we can be close. So that
we can photograph from in the action as opposed to being outside photographing at the action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how far do you take that sort of being a friend with a camera approach? Obviously, you start it before the day and it continues right through. Is there more to that afterwards? Are you staying in contact and keeping that friendship going?
It depends on the couple.
Yeah.
Honestly. Like some couples, we really do bond with and we get on a great friends vibe, and we'll go out for dinner afterwards, especially other wedding photographer couples. Because we shoot a lot of wedding photographer weddings because we have so much in common with them. But others, it's after the day's done.
It's whatever feels right and genuine, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the people. And
But we can be anybody's best friend for a day.
Yeah.
You talked about this, Lanny. You mentioned it. The importance of shooting in the action. Is that key to the style that you capture? I mean, obviously, it's key. It's key for relationship building, and that lets you into moments.
Oh yeah, I would say
absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, really, what we're trying to do is not document. What's the famous quote? David Allen Harvey, right?
Shoot how it feels.
Don't shoot how it looks, right? Fundamentally,
don't shoot how it looks. Shoot how it feels.
Yeah, and regardless of your approach, regardless of your style, that's really the essence of what we're all trying to do, is show the feeling, right? Yeah. And we've recognized that the best way to communicate emotion, to show how it feels, is to be in it versus outside shooting at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've mentioned that you want to sort of win their trust and be their friend before the day. What sort of techniques are you using to do that? How are you winning your client's trust before you sort of get to the day?
Well,
that'd be a huge answer, because that would probably, I mean, we can give you a few little tips, but it boils down to your whole brand, right? And the brand is not just your website and your logo and your color scheme. Your brand is how you conduct yourself. Your brand is how you respond to emails, how you respond to texts. It's the tone. It's the tone of everything. It's what you share on Instagram. It's what you share on Facebook.
And what you don't share.
And what you don't share. So it starts from the very moment a prospective client lands on our website or on our Instagram page. And then it's reinforced throughout the entire process. So we do have a very, what's the word? Systematic. Yeah. We do have a very systematic workflow that we follow with each client, because we want to make sure that we hit that vibe, not just with the clients that we bond with easily, but with the clients that there might even be a little bit of friction with. So, for example, this is just one example. Like the workflow is 100 and some lines long. Like I can't go through everything, but one example is a random email, right? So often clients are booking us a year or a year and a half out. And from when they book us to their wedding, we can go for 6-8 months without talking to them quite easily. So within our workflow, I've got random emails scheduled so that I know on a certain day I have to email a client, because you wouldn't go for 6 to 8 months without talking to your friend. So that's like one example of one part of our workflow in order to.
But it has to be built into the system. Otherwise, we'll forget it, right? Yeah. Not every client will receive the same experience. And really, even more important than the photos that we make for our clients, it's the experience that we create for them.
Yeah. And of course, those are intertwined.
They're intertwined. The photos are part of that experience, but everything that happens before the wedding.
No, I mean that the photos that we see, that our ability to get access comes from the experience that we give them as well.
Yes,
right? So,
absolutely. Yeah. And then, you know, the experience that we create when we deliver the photos for them, right? We want that to be
special.
Exactly. So but really it's just us being ourselves. You know, in terms of like when we're talking to them about their wedding and what to expect, we're not trying to be somebody else. It's just who we are. And I think that's where that's the best way to establish that trust is be yourself.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, trust is wholly important. In fact, it reminds me of I caught this conversation recently. It was online and they were looking at one of your images. I'm trying to think. I think it was of the bride peeing. Or trying to pee in the bathroom.
Yeah.
They were kind of shocked, actually, and they were saying that, you know, it's just inappropriate. Inappropriate was the word that they had used.
Yeah.
And I sat there reading, and I was a little bit disappointed, if I'm honest, because you guys have mastered something which some photographers lack, and that is that client trust. Tell us though, how do your clients feel when you show up in the bathroom with the camera and start photographing them in that kind of situation?
Yeah. Well, first of all, so that photo in particular, I didn't show up in the bathroom. I mean, I'd been with the bride all morning, right?
Yeah.
So literally I just followed her. I followed her in. I follow brides into bathrooms all the time. And as long as I don't make it weird, it's not weird. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally.
I'm like, and sometimes
I think if I followed them in, that might be weird.
that would be weird. But
Yeah.
I walk into there's. I mean, that's part of the story. I mean, when I mean, people can feel it's inappropriate, and I take no offense to that. Like, the photo wasn't made for you. But when does she need help going to the bathroom other than when she was 2 years old? When she has a dress on that weighs 40 pounds, right?
Yeah.
And when has she mounted the toilet in that fashion, like front ways, right? Like that was the story. The fact that she had to use the toilet in a completely different way than she did normally because she had this huge, massive dress on.
And so her and her mom and her bridesmaids were having this hilarious moment together.
Yeah. And if, you know, we take shots like that at weddings all the time that we don't show the world. But
we do it for the clients.
We do it for the clients.
Yeah.
And if the client were uncomfortable with me sharing that, I never would have shared it. Right? She loved it. She didn't care.
And if the client were uncomfortable with us shooting it, we wouldn't be shooting it, right? You can feel that, you can sense that sort of thing. It was clear to you that she had no issues with you, you know, being up on the
I was standing
stall.
on the counter and I mean, one of the things Lanny and I often say is the best way to be invisible is just to always be there. And it's true. Like by that point in the day, that bride she noticed me, but she noticed me the same way she noticed her bridesmaids that were helping her with the dress, right?
Yeah,
I was invisible.
exactly.
Like I wasn't there as the photographer or the consummate professional. I did, you know, whereas if I just showed up at those, like if I'd been sort of stealth my entire time, like if I was stealth and sort of hiding behind the curtains and trying to be as discreet as possible, and suddenly I'm there in the bathroom standing on the kitchen counter, I'm going to be totally noticeable.
Or if that had been our preconceived vision and we directed it somehow. And I think sometimes there's a misconception. People will see photos and assume that this is like our vision and we've made this happen. And it's not. We're just in documentary storytelling mode all day. And when something interesting is happening that's part of the story, we just keep shooting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would be absolutely hilarious if Erika was just in the bathroom and the bride walked in and you were like, oh, I'm really glad you're here. I've been ready for you to come here so I can get the amazing shot of you trying to pee. That would be the most awkward thing ever.
Yeah. I mean, there's been some awkward moments. There was like one time I was in like a public washroom, like with those sort of metal stalls. And I was like in the stall next to her, standing on the toilet paper roll. And then it kind of broke under me. And, you know, that was a little awkward. But everything's fine.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
And I mean, that's what I'm talking about, branding, right? Like, so we show that stuff on our site. If someone feels that's inappropriate, they're not going to hire us.
Yeah.
right? They're not
Exactly.
going to hire us. They're going to be like, oh, that's super inappropriate. Like, I'm not going to hire them.
And that's okay. Right?
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
great.
we don't need all
Yeah.
the clients, and we'll go out of our way. When we do the face-to-face video chat before they hire us, like we explain our approach and why it's a fundamental part of what we do. And if red flags start coming up, like questions, we just double down and explain why. Like this is what we do and why we do it. And then one of two things happens: either they get it, they're like, "Oh yeah, when you explain it that way, that's what I want. That makes sense," or it just becomes blatantly obvious that we are not the best fit, and they hire somebody else, and that's what we want in that case, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. I actually just love your images. I think, those moments they're raw and they're honest, and they're clearly just, they're your client all over, I love that kind of personality that you capture. But something that you said, if you're not up in that shit, forget it. Get up in that shit. I love that. Do you think people get too uptight as photographers about bare chests and bare parts? Like, is that? I mean, I suppose it's okay because that's you do you, but like in our culture over here in the UK, we are quite
reserved
in that kind of regard.
Oh, no, you're not.
Not compared to us over here.
Oh, really?
Canada is like the big. Well, we've shot weddings in the UK. We've gone pretty off the hook, but I kind of feel like yes, there is some truth. Like we photograph and we teach all over the world, right? And this is a common statement from people. I'm just going to use India as an example because we've taught there quite a few times, and
we've shot a few weddings.
There, and when we teach, people are like, "Yeah, but this doesn't work with my This doesn't work with my clientele." This doesn't work in the Indian market, is what they'll say. Or this doesn't work or if we're in Italy, this doesn't work with the Italian market.
It's different here.
It's different here. Brides don't want that here. I don't know what India's population is right now, but it is one of the highest populations in the world. So you can't tell me that your market only wants one thing. Same with Canada, same with US, same with the UK. The market does not want one thing. There is a huge diverse market out there. And you have a choice as a photographer. You can either make your work based on what you think the market wants, which is what a lot of wedding photographers do, and which is what Lanny and I did at the beginning of our process. There's nothing wrong with that. It's hard to sustain, but from a mental standpoint, but you can make work based on what you think the market wants, or you can make a market based on your work. And that's what we've tried to do, and that's what we're still striving to do, is make a market based on our work. And there's so much diversity around the world in terms of what the wedding photography, what brides and grooms and grooms and grooms and brides want, right? There really is. So, I mean, yes, there's differences in the market for sure, but there's still diversity.
Yeah. A lot of the time when someone's saying something like that wouldn't work here, it's just a case of no one there has seen you do that, or they've not seen that type of thing.
Well, sometimes we don't know what we want.
And then we're like, well, how come we got hired to shoot 2 weddings in India then? Like, if it's not,
Yeah.
So
earlier we talked about how you two work together in the business as a duo. I believe, do you always shoot together as a duo?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
for weddings,
how do you work as a duo at a wedding? Do you have like a telepathic language that you're communicating with each other at moments?
Well, we basically operate as solo individual photographers for a good chunk of the day, all morning long, right? We divide, and if it's a groom and a bride, then Erika will go with the girls and I'll go with the guys, simply because we've sort of become specialists at that game, right? Plus, it's that much easier for Erika to get the kind of access with the girls and me with the guys. So, and then when we come together after that, for the ceremony or for the rest of the day, essentially, we work together as a team. And depending on what's going on, we'll sometimes have a bit of a strategy where we know that Erika's going to go close and I'm going to go far. Or, you know, I'm going to go safe and Erika's going to do something a little, you know, outside the box or whatever. But that's basically how we roll for the rest of the day, right through to the dance floor, as you will have seen in the free class, as we work together and often we're making light for each other. One shooter, one lighter. But speeches, for example, we'll usually operate our own lights. So, you know, so one of us can focus on the speaker, for example, and one of us on the reaction, and we just move our own lights around.
Oh, okay. We have been in a few talks recently, actually. Well, not Greg, but I have, about walkie-talkies. And it's funny because we just had a couple by one of their films, like a couple from like 10 years ago. And this was back in the days when we used to use walkie-talkies. And it's so funny because I jumped into a sports car and I just completely destroyed the walkie-talkie, and that left Greg and I unable to communicate. And it was early days; we didn't really have another system in place.
I think that was like the third wedding we'd ever shot.
It was. So like we were totally like, totally green. And I just remember struggling. And ever since then, we've kind of developed our own like weird body language sign type thing with gestures.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you do that, but
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we do that.
And especially it's even more pronounced when you live together, right? Like when you've lived together for 27 years.
God, I can't even
you get to the point where you kind of know what the other person is thinking just by a look.
Yeah.
And so that happens. We actually, one of our first weddings too, we decided to try the Secret Service, as my
earpiece
AirPod falls out of my ear,
Yep.
the little Secret Service in-ear piece. And it was just a disaster. Like we just got tangled up with the cord and so we abandoned that.
That's exactly the one that we had, the little coily bit around.
It also doesn't help with the sort of breaking into being that friend with a camera thing, because you're then like, who are you talking to on your radio and what's that in your ear?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, if you want to look like the hired help.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point. That's a really good point I never thought of. But yeah, I was just...
but...
lasted one wedding, but we spent a bunch of money on them.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
Oh, we've tried all kinds of things.
You spend like $300 before you realize it's a mistake.
That is so true. Although I have to say, the gestures are great. Like Greg and I more or less know what each other wants from the other one. If the need arises, like it's hard to talk about what gestures you would do for certain moments on a podcast. So but
that's true.
Exactly.
I remember being caught once in a church doing these gestures to Greg. And I was confusing a whole bunch of people because they thought I was talking to them, trying to get them to do something. And I was looking at Greg, so like really trying to focus on trying to use my mind to turn Greg's head to look at me. Do it now, Greg. Look at me. But then someone else in the corner of my mind thought I was talking to them, and I looked a little bit foolish.
There's a little bit of that with us too, but then, depending on our vibe or dynamic, as you called it that day, sometimes, I'll be looking over at Lanny trying to get his attention, and I know he's intentionally ignoring me. Like and he'll claim he's not, but then I'll do the same to him. Like this goes both ways. But then there's that whole thing, because you do that. Yeah, you do that all the time. Mm-hmm. You did it the other day.
Yeah. Oh, did you? What did you do?
Yeah.
What did you do, Lanny?
He's always in trouble.
Oh, he's doing it now. He's ignoring us now. Shocking.
Doesn't narrow it down much.
Well, have you heard that phrase like, oh, you know when you're being looked at? Yeah, you ever heard that?
Yeah.
You can sense it?
Yeah.
That's what I do with Greg. Like, I literally stay with my eyes the widest they can be.
Burning a hole in the back of my head.
Just staring. I don't think that sounds correct. I think it's just folklore.
Well, one of the tricks we've learned is if the other one has a flash or whatever, we just start popping their flash repeatedly, triggering their flash.
Yeah, I'll just like make sure it's on the right channel, and I'm like,
that is a good technique.
I'll try not to do it if he's looking at it. But
that's never good.
Yeah.
No.
Oh,
so
man,
talking about flash,
sorry,
what sort of lighting? You've mentioned the Pro Photo flashes before. Are you using any continuous lighting at your weddings?
No, not anymore. We did early on, before we really knew what we were doing, honestly, with off-camera flash. It was kind of like our gateway drug into off-camera light.
Yeah.
because it was easy, right? We could see it. But once we got off-camera flash figured out and dialed in, we just preferred it usually for a couple of reasons. One is it tends to be less or more discreet, less of a noticeable, right, to come in with a big spotlight. But the other is just that the photos are that much sharper, right? It just freezes the action. So we noticed with the continuous light that they would always be a little bit soft. So really the only time that we are using continuous
we'll use the modeling
light,
lights sometimes.
we have for some things, but sometimes we're using the videographer's video lights. Like,
for sure.
You know, if they've got their video lights on, we'll often use that for the fill light, and then we'll just create some backflash.
Yeah. Do you guys mind our constant lights? It's something I always ask the photographer.
No. In fact, we often appreciate it and we'll use it, right? Because it'll.
No, I love it. I love when we're put in different scenarios. Honestly, so if like there's a videographer has a light where I wouldn't normally put one, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me to do something out of the box, right, that we haven't done before.
Yeah.
So I
Well, like for example, that the doggy style lighting technique.
which will make sense if you.
Yeah, you have to watch the class, but that one works really well when the videographers have a video light on.
Yeah.
Because that takes care of the fill light, and then we can just make the rim light. Because the video light can be.
We can just do the rim job.
Yeah, just do it.
Style.
I knew that was coming.
But the video light can be pretty flat, kind of flat and lifeless.
Yep.
But then when we add that kicker light in behind, all of a sudden it comes to life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, your lighting names, for anyone who don't know, one of them's the Masturbator. The other one's 69. You've got Doggy Style, Sideways Cowgirl. Do I have any others that I've missed? I'm sure there's...
Double team,
You're
threesome,
missing
the threesome.
The threesome. And the double team.
And the double team. Oh,
That's a lot of sexual references there. What's the story behind
Now,
that?
and outside of the context of the rest of that workshop, this is going to sound quite ridiculous and possibly inappropriate.
Possibly inappropriate.
Yeah. So I'd encourage you to give it a chance and see how it fits into the greater context.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we come up with those? Well, lighting can be fairly boring to teach. Really, like Lanny said earlier, you know, we've got the information in our workshop, and then we've got the way we present it, and we always try and present the information in a way that people will remember and will be of most benefit to them.
Yeah.
If it's engaging, if it's entertaining at the same time that it's educational, then it sinks in, right? Then it's worth watching. It's
As opposed to, what did you say yesterday? Lighting technique A, B, C. Like, let's come up with something better than that.
Yeah.
And I can't remember why we came up with it, but I think I was trying to figure out a name for the first one, which is on camera bounce flash. And for some reason, I just started to think about, okay, so it's something that works really well if you were by yourself. And I don't know, the train of thought somehow led me to the idea of the masturbator, and then it just went from there.
Yeah. But then we had to like Google some because like for side light, we're like, well, we didn't know any sideways sexual positions. So I just Googled it and sideways cowgirl came up. I still don't know what it is, by the way. And I'm like, well, we'll use the sideways cowgirl.
So your search history was looking pretty interesting.
That is definitely an incognito tab browse right there.
Yeah. I made sure it was... We were, in a private network there.
Yeah, kids in bed. Right, let's do
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Actually, it was so funny.
viewer discretion advised for
It
that
was so
class.
funny, though, because before we released that video, I was going through the final edit just to make sure everything was correct. And I had Timmy with me, and he's 11. And then the following day, we were watching a show on TV where the word masturbate was used. And Timmy's like, I've heard that word somewhere before recently. And I was like, oh yeah, you did yesterday. And he's like, oh yeah, it's one of your lighting techniques. And then I had to explain to him what it was.
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is as good a time as any.
Oh, you had the talk. Or part of the
I'm like,
talk.
have you learned about this at school yet? And he's like, nope. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll tell you now. Just
Awesome.
let me go get a glass of wine first.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that whole making it entertaining while learning is definitely a brilliant technique, because I think a lot of people will go to a workshop, and whether it's a 3-day workshop with the same speakers or it's like a 2-day conference with lots of speakers, there's so much content and information getting thrown at you that a lot of it's not going to stick. So if somebody's
And then if you think
5
about
days
what
later,
does
they're going to be
stick,
thinking, what was that light and doggy style? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll do that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, from the very first conference presentation we did, I remember we're like, okay, so we've got the information, which is important. Obviously, we need to have it jam-packed full of really relevant, really valuable information. But just as important in that is our performance. Like, we have to have it.
The experience.
The experience that we give the audience is just as important as the information. So we've always put a lot of intention and effort into that.
Do you? So when we go to we are not really lighting anything unless it's absolutely necessary. Like, we've got some pretty dark castles over here. Yeah. So like, we're really keeping it to the evening kind of stuff. Like the speeches. I would say the speeches are probably the first time we whap out a light, and the dance floor.
Yeah.
Do you guys flash throughout the day? And if so, like, how do you use your flash during the day?
Well, we do, but it's very situational and environmentally dependent, right? Like, it totally depends on the wedding and the situation, whether or not we bring out the flash.
Yeah. So it's hard to answer that question, because there's no sort of like, oh, here's the formalized approach. Like, we make sure for the ceremony, we make sure there's a flash here. Or I guess the only one that would be a little bit more formula based, or that would be the only thing that is more formula based, would be like family formals. And family formals will bring out 2 flashes, one for each side, maybe even with a little softbox. Just because the most important thing about those is documenting who was there and making sure they're well lit. We don't pour any creative energy into them at all. It's just, you know, but the rest of the day, there's no...
Yeah, and because the rest of the day, well, every part of the day other than portraits is just documentary mode, we can only light if it's possible, right? And, you know, so I shoot groom prep, and often with the guys, like they are never in one place for more than 20 seconds at a time, right?
Yeah.
And they get ready in 7 minutes flat. And so if I'm going to be using anything other than ambient light, it has to be the right situation that I'm able to, you know, get a light into position fast enough.
Yeah.
Well, and if you look at the last wedding the last wedding that we blogged, we didn't, because it's a very big misperception about us, though, is that we're just off-camera flash shooters, or that we shoot a lot. The last wedding we shot, we didn't, similar to you, we never used any artificial light until we were in a dark reception space.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's our preference. If we could just roll ambient light all day, we would. Another time that we'll start to think about pulling out flashes is if the light is just really shitty and we think that we can make more interesting light, or if the situation is, I don't want to say boring, but if it's not moment rich, packed with emotion, and it doesn't make sense to just be in there close, catching those moments. If it's a quieter, slower scene, then we might pull back and start to do something more dramatic with lights, if we have the time to do so. For example, if a bride's sitting getting her makeup done for 45 minutes and there's not a lot of interaction in the room, that might be a time that we're playing around with lights, versus if it was, a moment-rich morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally get you with the groom prep stuff. Like, they get ready so quick. But luckily, here in Scotland, a lot of our couples are foreign couples coming here to get married, and they're always so excited to wear a kilt, but they've got no idea how to put it on. So that slows them down and gives you a lot more time to shoot.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. And in that case, the worst thing you can do is help them.
Yeah.
Right?
I like to watch
Our
them
job
struggle.
is to
Totally.
and tell that story.
Same with bustling. Like, I so often see the wedding photographers going and doing the bustle. And I do it as well sometimes.
Because we want to be helpful.
But I'm like, I'm going to let them struggle, and I'm just going to get as many photos as I can.
Yeah.
Them struggling, trying to bustle up the dress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So What does a portrait session with Two Mann Studio sort of look like? Are you using these sort of taboo subjects and risky names for things with your clients to get some natural laughter out of them or anything?
Oh, yeah. So portrait session. Okay. So first of all, I'm just going to warn you, my phone is down to 15%.
Are you plugged in?
I can't plug in because my earphones are plugged into
Okay.
because stupid Apple make the earphone jack and the charging jack the same. I mean, that should last another half an hour or so, but I just want to warn you.
Yeah.
Portraits.
So portraits are, I mean, for years they've been our least favorite part of the wedding day, and they still are. But
because we have to direct.
Yeah.
It's the one time we have to actually.
Yeah. And I would say, we direct more than pose, like just what Lanny said, right? So I'd say one of the most useful things we did for our portraits early on in our career was we took a class, not with a posing coach, but with a acting coach.
All right.
And it really hammered home the idea that if we want portraits that portray an emotion, then we have to photograph a scenario that actually holds that emotion. So instead of posing our clients, we're giving them scenarios, actions. You know, if we want a romantic photo, then we have to give them something romantic to do. If we want something that's really high energetic and fun, then we got to give them something high energetic and fun to do. And so
because if we just ask them to be romantic, I mean, that's just going to shut that emotion down, right? And they're going to be self-conscious.
Yeah.
And so giving them actions takes them out of that worrying about if they're doing the right thing. It gives them something else to do and think about.
Yeah. So that, if we were to boil down our portraits, it's about actually creating some memories and some scenarios for our couples that when they look at the photos, they're not going to, remember the field or the trees. They're going to remember how they felt, and that they're going to have a memory associated with it, a feeling associated with the photo. Yeah,
it comes right back to the experience that we're giving them is even more important than the photos we're giving them. And it's part of it, right? The way that they experience the photos when we deliver is hinged not just on the quality of those photos, but the experience that it conjures up, that they remember, right?
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned a quote, and it sort of reminded me of, I think it's a Maya Angelou quote, and it's people won't remember what you did, but I'm butchering
but they'll remember how you made them feel.
They'll remember how you made them feel, and that's something that we sort of try to live by as well.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
I think, won't remember what you said.
Yeah, that's another part
of it. But they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, exactly. Erika and Lanny, thank you very much. You'll be at least, 2% of your battery left?
I'm at 5, but that's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, perfect time to wrap up. Tell our listeners where they can find you online and where they can enter for the Two Mann U content.
Well, the best hub for all of that information, honestly, is in our Facebook group. It's called Two Mann Workshops. So anyone can join that, and we do all kinds of stuff in there. And with regards to Two Mann U, it's just twomannu.com. So it's TWOMANN.
And for the next 4 days,
.com.
Yeah, sorry. And for the next 4 days, any of the buttons on that page will take you to that free chapter on Dance Floor Wedding.
Yes.
Yeah, which will go away on the 30th when we actually open enrollment for Two Mann U.
Okay. Yeah. So you heard it. Definitely go check it out. It's a really good watch. So awesome. Thank you very much. We are Cinemate Films. You can check us out at cinematefilms.co.uk. Our Instagram, our Facebook is /Cinemate Films. We hope you have loved this episode, and if you did, you can join us on Patreon, like I said earlier, at patreon.com/perspective by Cinemate, where from £1 you can support the creation of this podcast, and for the price of a coffee every month, you can get access to the Clubhouse Q&As, round table discussions, and even more bonus content that won't be available anywhere else. If you don't have any money to give, that's absolutely fine. You can just hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts and get your usual podcast for free. However,
in the meantime,
enjoy your life.